USA.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for the question. First, where are we going to get the qualified people from? It's not all of them that have fled to neighboring countries. Some of them are still in Sudan. And what we are saying is that we are going to get these qualified people into our schools. And why we are building the schools is because education is really needed in this region, because without education, most things will not be done. So that's why we chose to take the stand. Thank you very much.
Japan.
Thank you, Mr. President. To add something to what my fellow delegates from USA said, I would like to say that we can also bring people, qualified people from other countries, even Africa, let's say African countries, to come and help these schools and hospitals build up, so that the education aspect for the refugee children will be solved. Thank you.
It looks like our observer country have something to say. Sudan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, as a representative from Sudan, I would like to announce to the entire House gathered here today that 75% of the abled, of the people who can do the job, or the abled men and women, are fleeing from Sudan to neighboring countries. So, for the sponsors of Draft Resolution 2, I would like to tell you that you're planning on building, getting teachers from Sudan is going to be hindered by the fact that most of them are not there to do that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Turkey.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to add something to what my fellow delegate from US said. Well, since the war has disrupted the education system in Sudan, many parents will not allow their children to go outside, to go to school outside. This is why we think we thought it wise that we should bring the education to the camp, so that it will be easily accessed, or to be easily accessible to their parents and students as well in the camps. Thank you.
The United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. President. To add something to what my fellow delegates from Turkey said, since most parents are afraid that their children will be in danger if they go to school, we have provided security on these educational facilities in order to protect them and to assure parents that their children are in safe hands and nothing will happen to them. Thank you.
From UK, the resolution from your group mentioned security, but it didn't really state where the security was coming from. I would want to know, is it being provided by the sponsors of this draft, or is it planned to be provided by the Sudanese government?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm sure it will be provided by the sponsors of this draft resolution. Thank you.
France.
Thank you, Mr. President. We believe that if sanctions are imposed on the people in the Darfur region, it will limit their movements and will make them compromise with the peace agreements that are trying to be established. Thank you.
China.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I would, in the draft resolution too, they stated that education and building of schools is a way of achieving peace. I also like to ask the sponsors and signatories of that resolution, of that draft resolution, how that can be able to revive the labor force of the country, since most of them have fled to other countries. Thank you.
I think this issue has been mentioned as a concern from Sudan, and I'm happy to see the placard from Japan, and I would want to hear from.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. In our first session, our delegates from Sudan, he said that he knows that the people of Sudan will come back to Sudan after the war. So we believe that while education is ongoing in the refugee camps, when the war is ended, the people will come back and will help build the labor force of Sudan. Thank you.
Brazil.
Thank you, Mr. President. Earlier on, I asked a question to the sponsors of the draft resolution 2, and that question was how they were going to fund the building of those hospitals and schools, and my question wasn't answered. Thank you.
United States.
The money is going to come from the United States, the UK, and the Japan. Thank you very much.
So the sponsors are going to take responsibility for those structures. Russia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we vote on the resolution 1. Thank you.
This motion has been tabled by Russia. Any seconder? Uganda.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. As you've seen, we've debated on the draft resolutions we've heard, and we would like to vote on draft resolution 1. Thank you.
Any against? USA.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, USA believes we've not deliberated enough. Certain issues need to be clarified for us to move to a vote. So therefore, I think this session should still go on. Thank you very much.
I'll take a division of the House. Delegates in favor of the motion that we vote on draft resolution 1. Show by placards. Thank you. Delegates against? Abstentions? Thank you. With 6 delegates for the motion, 7 against the motion, and 2 abstaining, this motion fails and we continue with deliberations. Any more points for debate? France.
Thank you, Mr. President. To answer the question from the Sudanese delegate about how we can achieve complete education, we think that when we bring teachers from other African countries to teach, we will pay them properly and ensure that there's 24/7 security to ensure they don't also flee from the country. Thank you.
Gabon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Please, I would like to ask. Thank you. I would like to ask a question to the second resolution, the resolution 2. Please, about the sanctions. What if the people in the Darfur region don't want to be sanctioned? How are they going to still continue or do what they are? Continue with the sanction plan that they are focused on. Thank you.
In other words, how do the sponsors intend to implement these sanctions? UK.
Thank you, Mr. President. To answer the question from my honorable delegates from Gabon, we believe that these sanctions will pressure the government of Sudan in order to comply with our decisions, because they have decided not to comply with our decisions, and therefore these sanctions will imposed on them will make them agree with us. Thank you.
Yes, UK, that's the effects of the sanctions are clear to Gabon, but the question is, how do you intend to implement those sanctions? USA.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. President. Sorry. It takes time for a caterpillar to grow into a butterfly. We will continue to impose the sanction on them, and as a matter of time, they will get tired, and one day they shall take this in consideration. Thank you very much.
The USA, you've still used the word sanctions and imposing it on them. In what form? How are you going to implement those sanctions? What kind of sanctions are you going to place on the people of Sudan? I think that is where the question really lies. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, citizens have been implicated in the violence, and these sanctions are going to block the assets of these citizens implicated in the violence, so they do not support the government together with the Janjaweed in the civil war in Sudan. Thank you very much.
I think that is clearer. So financial assets are going to be frozen. Japan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Please, I would like to ask the sponsors and the signatories of draft resolution 1 that we stated in draft resolution 2 that we want the Sudanese government to account for the aid that has already been given to them. So we'd like that statement or that question to be addressed. Thank you.
You've made a statement in your draft and you want it to be addressed by them?
Our statement was like a question. We wanted it we want them to account for the aid that they've already given to us. So we want them to say something about it.
The reaction of the sponsors of the first draft on what the provision is in your...
Yes, please.
Any more points on the floor of the House? Austria.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we vote on the draft resolution 1 because we've debated a lot and I think we should vote on a resolution.
Any seconders? United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. President. I second this motion because I think it will give an opportunity for us to decide and specify whether this draft resolution is the best for this problem. Thank you.
Any delegates against the motion? Seeing none, it's so decided. I put the draft resolution 1 up for vote. Delegates in favor of draft resolution 1, show by placards. Thank you. Delegates against? Abstentions? Honorable delegates, with 9 for the motion and 5 against the motion, unfortunately I have to announce that we have 2 veto countries voting against the motion, and therefore this draft resolution has been vetoed, making it automatically a failure. I therefore declare this draft resolution failed. Thank you very much. Any points on the floor of the House? May I invite the sponsors of the first draft, after the failure of that draft, to make some comments on how the voting went?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I would like to say that the voting that was carried a few minutes ago was a free and fair one, and I believe that if even our draft resolution didn't pass, we can give suggestions to the other draft resolution to make it a full, compact peace plan for Sudan. Thank you.
Are there any more points on the floor of the House? Brazil.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I think that the sanctions placed on the Sudanese government on the freeze of assets is harsh, and so I propose that it be softened a little bit to allow the Sudanese people get access to some basic needs. Thank you.
Any reaction from the sponsors of draft resolution 2? France.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we break for an unmoderated caucus to implement the amendments stated by the sponsors of draft resolution 1. Thank you.
Thank you, France. Anyone to second the motion? Lebanon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Since all the amendments have been made, I second the motion that the resolution 2 be voted for. Thank you.
Any objections? Seeing none, I put draft resolution 2 up for vote. Delegates in favor of the second draft resolution, show by placards. Thank you. Delegates against the motion? Thank you. Abstentions? Thank you very much. Honorable delegates, there are no vetoes on this draft resolution, and we have 12 for the motion for the draft and then 1 against the draft. Therefore, by a majority decision without any veto, this resolution passes. Thank you very much for your cooperation and your hard work. The Secretariat will make all the resolutions available at your offices before morning tomorrow. Thank you. Any points on the floor of the House? Ethiopia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we adjourn this session to our next meeting. Thank you.
Any seconders? Japan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I second this motion because I believe that we've come to a final consensus. Thank you.
Any objections to the motion to adjourn meeting? Seeing none, I declare this meeting adjourned till our next session.